Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Prep 3, Help, I Need Support, and this is all a part of COM 357 Mystery Theater. Question: what do Walt Disney, Michael Jordan, and Chris Jordan have to do with getting support? You'll find out very shortly. But please note, disclaimer, this is a very important prep, and although it's going to be longer than your previous two, actually one video, please make sure you listen and take notes appropriately because this is the foundation to everything we talk about. So, let's pick it up. What is a source? It could be a book, newspaper, or even the internet. But the key is that it has to be credible information that supports your claim. Information for information's sake is not necessarily a source. For instance, dictionary.com is not going to be a logical source for your first speech. Even though it's credible and we can trust it, it's not really going to support your claim. You have to understand that your takeaway statement is essentially setting up the argument for your speech, or what it is you're essentially trying to argue to your audience. And so you can't just simply say, for instance, that cats are better than dogs. You have to provide some kind of support so that people can believe and trust you. Now, I just found this picture. I'm not necessarily sure what all this means, but if you look at the wonderful support at the bottom, the average viral views of a cat video is close to 9,000, where the average viral views of a dog video is under 6,000. So you can see, without support, we're making claims that aren't really warranted. So that's kind of the value of why we need information that really backs up what you're trying to argue. Because otherwise, we're just making a bunch of claims. All right. So there are three different types of sources, and for your speeches I'll ask that you try to incorporate all three of these, because the best speeches are the ones that offer the most diversity of sources. Let's start with something you're very familiar with, known as statistics. Now, I know this sounds scientific, but it's true. Statistics are essentially the organization and summary of numerical data. A lot of people just think statistics are numerical data. Some people believe that statistics are the science of stating precisely what we do not know. Yes, I can read off the screen very well, but for the record, I actually write a script out. Some things we need to keep in mind about statistics. Number one, if we're just citing a bunch of numbers without summarizing and organizing them, it's going to confuse us, like this wonderful commercial from Sprint.
Welcome to the Now Network. Population 49 million. Right now, 379 couples are splitting up. 253 by phone, 42 by email, and 84 by text message. 13,000 people are streaming Pandora on a bus. 3,700 people just found all their friends on Looped. 92 just realized they were in the exact same place. That's happening now. America's most dependable 3G network, bringing...
All right, this may be the Now Network, but let's face it. What is the point of this? There is way too many statistics, and I hope this commercial made you feel a little bit overwhelmed, because that's how your audience feels when you just throw numbers at them. Remember, statistics are the organization and summary of numerical data. It is not just a bunch of numbers. We need to actually make sense out of it. So Michael Jordan, let's look at this wonderful commercial to see how he makes sense out of his numbers.
I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over and over again in my life. And that is why I succeed.
All right, I don't know about you, but I love this commercial because he cites a bunch of numbers, but then he summarizes at the very end. What does it all mean? I love it. And I hope that this Michael Jordan commercial, kind of pitted against that Sprint commercial, shows you the importance of giving a rationale behind the numbers. You see, where the Sprint commercial fell short, Michael Jordan picked it up and made the game-winning shot. Now, on to Chris Jordan. Some of you are probably wondering, okay, what does this picture represent? Well, Chris Jordan is now a famous artist, and you can go to his website, chrisjordan.net, who tries to make sense out of all the crazy numbers. Take a look in his 2008 TED Talk video to see what this represents.
This is an image I just recently completed that is, when you stand back at a distance, it looks like some kind of neo-Gothic cartoon image of a factory spewing out pollution. And as you get a little bit closer, it starts looking like lots of pipes, like maybe a chemical plant or a refinery or maybe a hellish freeway interchange. And as you get all the way up close, you realize that it's actually made of lots and lots of plastic cups. And in fact, this is 1 million plastic cups, which is the number of plastic cups that are used on airline flights in the United States every 6 hours. We use 4 million cups a day on airline flights, and virtually none of them are reused or recycled. They just don't do that in that industry.
Isn't it amazing to think about how many cups are used on airlines? If you just gave me that statistic, I'd probably forget it. But what Chris Jordan does so well is make sense out of the numbers. Not only does he summarize it, but he also showcases what it means. So, what did this teach us about how to use these effectively? Number one, just like Michael Jordan, you have to summarize what these statistics means. Don't be like Sprint and just throw numbers at us. It doesn't mean a thing if it doesn't summarize what it all means. And number two, what does this look like in real life? Just like Chris Jordan showed us, showcase the numbers. What does 8 out of 10 people look like? How many people is that in this class? Have them stand up. Say, hey, 8 out of 10 people, that's 80% of this class. So have 80% of the class stand up so we can look at it, so we can see it. Infographics really capitalize on this. So, in summary, statistics, you got to summarize them. You got to make sense out of them. What do these numbers mean? And, if at all possible, showcase. So it's not just a number. Make it so visual we don't forget it, just like all of those cups. All right, number two, when we talk about testimony, a lot of people get confused. They think that testimony is your personal testimony, maybe a life story that you have to offer. But it's a little bit different than that. It's actually an opinion from an expert in the field. You have to understand that a testimony is essentially a professional opinion from somebody that has expertise in this particular field. So, we look no further than my boy, Dr. Mehmet Oz. He has a lot of street credit. Why? Well, he's not only a doctor, but he's also a best-selling author. He's been on the Oprah Winfrey Show, which makes anybody credible. And, you know, he's got his own TV show. So, there you go. If you were to ask Dr. Mehmet Oz a question about your health, specifically something that had to do with your cardiovascular system, you could trust his opinion because he is a verified expert in their field. Now, some tips on how to use this effectively. Number one, make sure that they are actually credible, as I've shown you here with Dr. Mehmet Oz. But number two, you have to tell your audience why they are credible. For a good example, let's look to a comical movie you may have seen known as Old School.
Unfortunately, the captain of the university debate team had a scheduling conflict. Yeah, so we had to bring someone else in to fill in for this event. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the co-host of CNN's Crossfire, famed political consultant, the Ragin' Cajun, Mr. James Carville.
All right, we got the Ragin' Cajun. Even if you don't know who he is, this particular person has done a great job. Well, I guess this particular person being Cheese, if you've seen the movie, does a great job of summarizing who the Ragin' Cajun is. Gives them the credibility, tells the audience why we should trust them. That's exactly what I want you to do when you're using a testimony. Let us know why they're an expert in their field. Find any information you can that's going to make them sound credible. So, statistics are organization and summary of data. A testimony is a professional opinion from an expert in their field. Finally, my favorites, examples. An example is a real-life scenario that's going to showcase some kind of principle. Now, I say it's usually in the form of stories because examples are usually stories, right? And a real-life scenario can't really be told in any other form than a story, right? So, I'm going to tell you a story about Walt Disney. Did you know that he was fired for his first job for lack of imagination and no good ideas? Kind of hard to believe, isn't it? But this is a great example of someone who perseveres, right? This source actually comes from Business Insider from April 25th, 2011, and it's 15 people who were fired before they became, quote, filthy rich. But what's really interesting about this is it's really 15 different examples of why you shouldn't let things get you down or why you should continue to persevere, because you might end up like J.K. Rowling, the author of Harry Potter, or even better, Walt Disney, world-renowned person that makes people happy, right? And a multi-billionaire. All right, so again, examples is any kind of real-life scenario that really helps to showcase specifically the principle that you're trying to argue. We use examples all the time. However, you can use them too much. So please do not overdo it on the examples. One example per speech works really well. If you think about it, infomercials, they use tons of examples, right? They show us how frustrating it is when we can't get that omelet out of the pan because it's stuck. The fact is, you can overdo examples. So I would say one example per speech. And make sure that example is well known. Make sure people know who that example is, or know that story, or can relate to that story. There are 3 different kinds of sources. There are statistics, which is the summary and organization of numerical data. There's testimony, which is a professional opinion from an expert in their field. And then finally, examples, which is just simply a real-life scenario that helps to showcase an important principle. All right, at this point, I'm going to be giving you 3 tips on how to begin finding sources for your first speech. I believe all great searches start with Google. However, the first tip I'm going to give you is do not type in the proverb in Google. Why is that? Because you're not going to like the results you get. If anything, they're just going to try to translate it for you, but at this stage, you've already translated your proverb or quotation. So, what happens when you do that? Well, let's type in 1 in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. Essentially, you got a bunch of dictionary stuff, right? Urban Dictionary. What does this really mean? All it does is tell you it's better to have the advantage or opportunity that is certain than having one that is worth more but is not so certain. What are they saying? They're basically saying that if you've got a sure thing, don't leave it for something that seems better, because you don't know if it's really a sure thing. But you see, when we typed in the proverb, all it did was give us translations. It really doesn't help argue whether or not this is true. It just tells us what it means. So number 1, do not type the proverb or quotation into Google, because you won't really get any support. All right, number 2, try to think about key words. What are the key words in your thesis that you're essentially trying to argue? All right, so let's use 1 in the hand is worth 2 in the bush. What are the key words here? Well, we're really talking about certainty, keeping what you have. So I'm just going to type in the sure thing. So type in the sure thing, and guess what ended up happening? Well, guess what? I got a bunch of stuff about the sure thing. All right, so let's try this again. Let's type in instead opportunities. Okay, so should we let go of opportunities? All right, so we got a bunch of different things here. 40 ways to let go and feel less pain. Okay, so now we're talking about regrets. So what's interesting about this is I've kind of tried to figure out some keywords, and so now I've kind of used the keyword opportunities, and I'm getting a lot of different stuff here. And maybe this could change my thesis. Instead, I'm going to say, sometimes it's actually a good thing to let go of certain opportunities. So even though an opportunity is available, it doesn't mean you should necessarily take it, because I'm getting a bunch of stuff that's talking about maybe we should let go of some opportunities. Now, I also have some regrets and other stuff, and maybe this might go somewhere, but it might not. But either way, what I've tried to do is take that proverb or quotation and try to find some keywords, right? Originally, I tried the sure thing. That didn't work. So then I looked at opportunities, and I started to find some stuff that came up. Now, finding keywords is not always easy, and as you can tell, I'm doing this on the cuff, so this is a challenge. If those 2 things aren't working, you can simply ask the question you're trying to answer. So, in this particular instance, I'm kind of asking, is it best to say no to opportunities? Now, what's nice about asking a question is that you do get some interesting ideas. Right here, I've got 7 business reasons to say no. To launch a career, just say yes. 7 simple ways to say no. Learning to say no is a part of success. So now I'm thinking, wait a second, this could actually work. I could actually turn this into why it's good to say no to certain opportunities. Now, I actually have to go in here and I have to look at some of these sources and see whether or not they're credible. But don't you worry, we are going to do that for Prep 3, which is going to be icing your articles. But what's really cool about this is now, we have found a way to translate this so that we can argue it. A lot of students, they get wrapped up in their translation because they realize, oh no, I can't argue this. So, my tips are to you, don't type in the proper quotation. All that's going to do is translate it, you've already done that. Okay, that's going to throw you in a loop. Number 2, try to find some key words. The big ideas that you're trying to argue in your speech. Try typing those into Google's. If that does, try typing that into Google, not Google's. Sorry. Number 3, if that doesn't work, you can always ask the question you're trying to answer and see what comes up. The goal is you have to let these sources take you into a rabbit hole and get you thinking, you know what, maybe I can make this change. So don't feel like you're strapped to your thesis. Just be thinking about, okay, wait a second, you know, how could I maybe reinterpret this so I can argue it? Sometimes you can't always argue what you want to essentially argue in your thesis. Now, I know this is going to be confusing, I know it's going to be challenging, so do your best to try these tips and see what happens. If you're confused, you have questions, let me know. Either way, I'm here to help, and I hope that this has in fact been helpful for you. See you next time.